Hey, what's up guys? So we're going to be going over the newly introduced Diablo 4 early look at the skill tree. Keep in mind this is all pre-alpha and it's not final, but there's a lot of cool ideas here that we'll go ahead and cover. And on top of that, they actually showed off a few cool mechanics with the sorceress over here, as there's going to be more skills that you can equip on that character, but they're kind of going to be passives. But anyways, yeah, new quarterly update. Let's go ahead and hop right into it. We're going to go ahead and go right into the information that you guys basically want. I'll kind of sum it up over here, but I will pin it down below in case any of you guys do want to go ahead and read everything. So first off, they do mention ancestral, demonic, and angelic powers, and to sum up what they mentioned over here, they felt like people had to actually happen to have two different sets to go ahead and carry around so they can meet the threshold for the demonic or angelic powers. For some of you guys that don't know what the heck this is, it was basically a stat point that would make it so your item wouldn't get these bonuses if you didn't have the requirement of stat. You can almost think of it like the strength or dexterity requirement like in Diablo 2. However, the item would still be able to be equipped, you just simply wouldn't get one of those powers if the item is specifically rolled not only demonic but also angelic on it. You couldn't really go for both potentially depending on your build. But anyways, what they said is it felt like it was a little bit too difficult, so they're going to mention some stuff later down the line. So I'm not sure if they're going to be dropping it completely. They didn't say that, but they basically mentioned that they had some mixed feedback with the itemization in the game. But speaking of that, they also mentioned legendary items over here. They're exploring some big changes over here. They mentioned that the character's power is too dependent on items. They want to put more of the player's power back into the character build to make it feel impactful. So they're having a lot of mixed team feedback right here, but all it really comes down to, which I felt like it was really interesting because they don't really go into it. They said, for example, should magic quality items have higher affix stats than rare items, meaning that the blue items would have a chance to maybe become viable for endgame content if they happen to have higher stats. For some categories, that could be a good idea. It reminds me of an item in Path of Exile that I just feel like no one really uses. This is another action RPG, but it's a jewel called Hidden Potential and increases your damage for each magic item equipped. I think maybe it'd be easier for them to potentially just look at a legendary item that would make it so all of your blues would have like quad stats on them versus just making it so blue items could be viable for everyone. That's how I personally feel about that, because if you guys think about it in the aspect of making this game for casuals, it would be very confusing to have all these rarities in the items and a blue be more powerful than others. But for me personally, I like seeing all these, but at the end of the day, you have to also look at potentially needing item filters for games and how difficult that can be for some people that are maybe on console. They don't want to set it up. They just want to go ahead and play. So I'm curious to know how you guys feel about the itemization in the game, if they happen to make blue items viable for endgame. For me, the more choices, the better. The more complexity, the better. But I know that they definitely want to make this game accessible for casuals. And again, that will not make sense from a casual standpoint over here to do that. But anyways, specifically looking at the skill tree, there's so much to go ahead and cover. So let me go ahead and actually blow up the skill tree. So I'll go ahead and sum up what they mentioned over here. So I'm not sure where you start at as far as the skill tree goes. They did not mention that, but it would make more sense to start off from the root. I wish there was maybe an indication of what path you were going, but since they basically all go straight up over here, you guys can see the different skills. Now, there are different skills. Some of them are just going to be passives and some of them are going to be actives. So the circle ones are going to be modifying existing skills and the square ones are going to be the actual skill itself. Now going back into the system over here, with the newer design skill tree over here. So basically, again, the squares are going to be the actual skill. You can see it has 18 mana cost with charge bolt, and it releases 6 bolts of lightning that course run a erratic pattern and deals 18 to 22 damage. I like how it specifically says lightning damage, so you know exactly what you're dealing, and maybe the color might be some indication potentially as well. But I'm guessing the number over here is going to be the thing that can be modified by the other points that you'll be able to allocate via the tree over here. Also wanted to mention, looking at the skill tree, like in Diablo 2, we happen to have some skills that will require you to have 2 different things. Like for example, let's say you want to do meteor, you might need fireball plus the other skill to get it. Now this skill tree just kind of seems more so path towards you just pick something that would branch out versus requiring 2 specific skills to get 1 skill, if that makes sense. So it seems very, I would say more so linear than complex. But you guys can let me know how you feel about that. I feel like D2's skill tree system was actually pretty cool. Like you had these different tabs, and each individual one had its own skill tree versus having this giant one over here, which could overwhelm some players. I personally am perfectly fine with that complexity, but again, when we're looking at a standpoint where they want the casuals to be able to get a grasp on it, I think it's actually much simpler to have 3 different tabs. You can see cold, lightning, fire, and then you could go ahead, have a more simple skill tree, but yet there are several different ones, so there could be potential for complexity over there. But we'll talk a little bit more about more complexity when we get to what they mentioned for the end game. Okay, so anyways, yeah, there's showing off another skill over here where it shows the mana cost, and then it does lightning damage, and then there's other skills over here, but this one's different. So this is a circle. Like the previous ones, those were squares, and this one is a circle. So this is an upgrade node is what these are going to be called, and it says charge bolt creates an additional bolt, so you get to fire an additional one. In D2 we had the system where we would put more skill points into one skill, and then not only would it increase the damage, but maybe you would get more charge bolts, or it would interact a little bit differently over here. But again, you can modify this skill. Now this one over here is something that I would say is kind of new to Diablo. But anyways, this one over here, it says ball lightning collapses into crackling energy at the end of its path. Crackling energy gives 25 mana when you move near it, so it's a way to replenish your resource. But there's an RNG chance thing that they are going to be adding into some of these as well. Now, interesting enough with this one particularly, where they show off the different nodes, it looks like there's almost like a half a point. This is something I haven't seen. They didn't talk about it, but it is something that I noticed where this one looks completely full. I'm wondering if you're going to have to put 2 skill points in order to progress on some of these. Again, this is something that I have no idea, but let me know, guys, how you feel about having multiple stat points required to go into another, I guess, path, or to continue on your path instead of putting 1 point into each one. Some might require more points. And then this one over here, which was actually shown off with the bigger skill tree, this is more so towards the bottom. They're kind of hard to see, but you'll see that we also have some of these towards like the larger section of the tree at the top, where there's like these little diamonds, but there's also, I'm going to call these like rhombuses. They're kind of tilted over here, and you can see that these look like they're actual different things that we're going to be putting points into as well. But this one says rank 1 out of 3, so again, you might be able to put more points into some of these as well. You can see it says overcharge, and it says critical hit effect. Lightning damage has a 3% chance to create a crackling energy, so that's going to again give you that mana resource back over there. And then going into the sorceress enchant system. So this is actually really cool. So they mentioned that the barbarian had this system where you're able to equip basically an extra set of weapons, and you'll be able to swap into them, which is a really cool, unique mechanic. And the druid is able to transform. Now the sorceress enchantment system is actually pretty cool. So some of the skills will be able to be enchanted in a slot. So you'll see that the skill bar over here, we have the 1 through 4, and then we have the left click and right click. So in total, then it's going to be 6 skills. But if you slot it into this other section over here, these little 3 circles, you can actually gain a passive effect of that skill. So you can see Ball Lightning over here has the enchant slot effect. When crackling energy would form, Ball Lightning is formed instead. So it does something completely different. And then Ball Lightning no longer collapses into crackling energy. So again, that's another thing that I think is kind of cool and newer to the game. So the sword can have more skills, but you won't be able to control these. So they again mentioned the system over here. They're just showing off like when it's actually equipped. Now, so they're showing the difference between actually using this skill right here. And this is an example using the meteor, and if you go ahead and equip it in the enchant slot over here, it's just going to go ahead and be like bombardment, which is on like the Crusader, where it randomly throws out the meteor. Like you won't have control over it, but it'll just be like a free extra skill. So I think that's interesting. Hopefully it will prioritize hitting the enemies, because I know there's like the Arcane Torrent variant where it goes randomly and people just simply don't enjoy having the target just be completely off when you use a skill over there. Now, they do briefly mention the Endgame System over here, and there really isn't too much talks about like their system in terms of mapping or what they are going to do for the endgame content. But anyways, they do mention over here that it's not even going to be in the next blog, but it will be a significant source of power that comes from your class. So there's going to be something big towards the end game, and it says this system is intended to provide more depth and replayability than what Paragon currently offers in Diablo 3, which is basically you max out everything and you throw it all into main stat, right? But we'll have to wait and see, and they basically said we'll dig deeper into the game. But specifically, one thing that I wanted to go ahead and highlight right here is that we believe that the end game progression system is where the difficult to master component will come in and should meet the expectations of the most hardcore Diablo players out there. And I think that's a great system. Allow some of the casual players, or maybe the people that don't want to spend thousands and thousands of hours into the game. I mean, most people don't hit like a GR 100. Most people are pretty happy with completing even just the campaign, and that's it, but for some of us, we like to go ahead and create content and just try out a lot of different builds. In fact, they mentioned over here in one of the posts, I'm going to go ahead and mention it really quick. I think it was like they used the numbers specifically 30 and 40%. Is in terms of the skill tree, how much are you going to be able to fill out that skill tree? It said they're aiming for 30 to 40%. So what this could mean, we're looking at about 3 to 4 builds potentially that would be, I guess, viable for like that skill tree if we look at how many nodes that you can put in. So that's good that you cannot fill up the entire skill tree. So I think that's a good change overall, because again, with D3 you can swap between any time, which some people like. And I'm curious to know how you guys feel about that system. Do you guys like it to be more of a permanent system, or do you like it where you can go ahead and just, I want to swap builds really quick? Or should there be some type of penalty where you have to like either pay some type of gold in-game currency or kind of grind for the ability to swap your build? For me, I like being able to at least try out all the skills at least once, because that's where you're able to find out what skills that you actually liked, and you can go ahead and test them out. But in terms of having it more permanent, it makes it so like your decisions matter more versus like, oh, just go ahead and do whatever because I can swap out at any times. But to kind of go over how I feel about the system, I think having a skill tree is good. But again, when you look at the skill tree, and to give them feedback, because this is the most important thing, because they mentioned we're looking at all of your guys' feedback on all social media, I like the idea of having a skill tree. I think it's a really cool system, but it's too simple. It's basically pathing out, and yeah, you do happen to have these branching paths, but I think it would be really cool to be able to see like 2 skills go into 1 skills like we had with Diablo 2. But going into further for endgame content, them mentioning like basically blue items being viable, I think Diablo 2 did it really well. And I always go back to Diablo 2 once in a while because the systems are so great in place, where you have these runes that are basically partial currency that you would utilize later down the line for some of these rune words. And on top of that, you would have to go ahead and get that armor. Maybe you can make it so the base items are going to be more valuable to be able to pick up for that end game content. So again, the newer player to the game can still enjoy the game and have fun, and those powerful like rare and legendary items will still be good, but at the very, very far end game, the more powerful stuff is going to be things that we'll actually have to craft. I mean, there's a lot of systems with all like the gems in Diablo to go ahead and acquire some of these smaller currencies, and you would start to build them up. I mean, to be honest, it's such a pain to go through all of the gems, back in the day. But like, as someone that has played, thousands of hours into Diablo, it at least allows those smaller things to be a little bit more useful during the later game. As in Diablo 3, we get some of these items early game. Pretty much if you're not like getting the item at max level, the item is almost worthless at the very end game. And I would like for the items to be more so that like they can be viable at like mid-level. Sometimes this item might be viable throughout the entirety of your playthrough. So I think that would be something to look at. Also, another thing to look at for endgame content potentially is charms. This is something that wasn't mentioned, but I think that charms was a cool idea. Because it allows you to go ahead and have some sort of progression where you're constantly able to go ahead and get some small little upgrades, while you're not really needing to go ahead and be like, oh, is this item better? You just throw it in there. I think it's going to be too hard to manage this. This is a screenshot of Path of Diablo where they have a separate area where it's just for your charms. So that could be something to take into consideration. So this would be something way, way later. I'm talking endgame content. So again, it's separated from your main inventory, so you don't have to worry about managing it. But again, when you want to keep the game more simple, and I think that they definitely want to go ahead and do that, it just adds a layer of complexity that just might be too hard for some people to manage. What do you mean I gotta have all these items and I just keep them in my inventory, right? It just might be kind of confusing. But there was also kind of a give and take with Diablo 2. The most efficient way to play is obviously you max out all of your inventory with charms, and then if a good item drops, you hold I so you can hit your inventory and then pick up the item, leave the game, and you have it over your cursor for the next game. But realistically, you are sacrificing your item space for potentially more DPS. So there was kind of a give and take with that, although I think just having maybe a few of these could be good. Maybe you can only take like, one large, one small, and one grand charm, just to add a little bit more to the game. But again, the more you add in terms of complexity to the itemization, the more that you scare away other people. When again, you look at some people, when they see Path of Exile skill tree, they legitimately just say, nope, I can't do it. So again, I think that visually, in terms of feedback for them, I think that this needs a little bit of work, not only in terms of complexity, but I think that it might be too complex visually, the way it looks, because there's just so many like branches to go ahead and go out. I think having it in separate tabs, like, with Barbarian, you have maybe like swords, axes, and you separate them, and then kind of simplify it so there is just more visual representation of what you're going for versus just everything all at once, which is very cluttery. But anyways, those are my thoughts on it. You guys can let me know yours down below, and if you guys do have feedback, let me know in the comment section below, as I do like seeing what you guys have to say, because we all enjoy different aspects of an action RPG. But I hope this game will have as much complexity as possible. That's personally what I want, but I know that at the end of the day they're going to try to simplify it, because it makes sense. You don't want people to be like, whoa, too much content, I can't grasp it, and they're not going to be able to play with their friends. But anyways, thanks for tuning, guys, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it, and if you're new to the channel here, hit subscribe, turn that bell if you'd like to see more updates on Diablo, as the new Season 22 PTR will be coming out, and I'll be covering that, as there's going to be a lot of really cool new builds emerging with that extra Kanai slot, plus, of course, that new seasonal buff. But anyways, take care, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video. Have a good one, and I'm signing out. Peace.